I am live on Facebook and YouTube, and I'm fixing to get live on Instagram. There we go. Show is a convoluted system trying to go live on all these different channels. Just wanted to point that out for posterity's sake. But anyway, so I'm back with my weekly live comics chat. For those of you where this is the first time here, your first time seeing me or watching my channel, every week on Friday, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, I do a live stream broadcast on the stuff that caught my attention in comic book world this week. Now, most of what happened this week was kind of like a rehash and kind of like more fallout from pre-existing stories. For example, people are still obviously talking about Charlie Kirk, and they will be for a long time, because that was a game-changing moment in American history. Okay, the world changed when Charlie Kirk got hit. So we're going to be talking about that for a long time. So people are still talking about that. People are still talking about Cracker Barrel, and they're talking about the impact of that decision, because Cracker Barrel is now the newest Bud Light, the newest company to go woke and go broke and go in and literally rip up everything that made them popular and then replace it with things that are bland and generic and completely destroying their historical identity, and then wondering why their long-term customers had an issue with that. So Cracker Barrel's going through that. People still talking about that. People are still talking about Jimmy Kimmel and, him coming back, him being fired at first and then him coming back. And what does that mean? And, was the firing ever anything serious? And that kind of thing. So they're still talking about that. Kamala Harris has been in the news that she looks like she's trying to make a political comeback, reposition herself for some future office runs, it seems like. So, I mean, all of that is stuff we've seen before. All of that is stuff. Okay, that's me. Let me get rid of my echo. So, all that is stuff that, we've seen plenty of times. And so I'm just letting my Twitter peeps know, my Twitter family know, because it's like a family now. Being online and being on Twitter is like a family. So I'm letting them know that I'm here live, so people can come check me out live, because I love to read your comments as I'm going through. So anyway, so much of, like I said, much of what has happened this week has been a rehash, and we're still talking about the fallout from stories that happened earlier this month. So what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about unpopular opinions. Now, I made a string of tweets last night, and the original prompt was, let's hear your unpopular opinion about whoever. So I made a string of those tweets. So I'm actually going to talk about that, because there's been a lot of feedback from that. Then there's another story I talked about that people are still pushing back against. So I really thought I would come on and give some more insight kind of to what I was thinking, what I meant, because sometimes you just, would have to write a novel on Twitter to try to give some type of comprehensive approach to what you're saying or doing. And then sometimes it's just not worth all that. So I'll just say it live. So let me pull that up and we'll start from there. Okay. The first tweet should be on your screen right now. Let me get rid of this. Let me see. Okay, let me make that bigger. Okay, so it says unpopular opinions on Spider-Man. I said we have proven that we love Peter Parker at every age, from 15 to 35. So he was 15 when he first became Spider-Man, and then he's kind of topped out in his mid-30s when he was a teacher and a teaching assistant and a professor, and when he had Mayday, when he had children. Okay, we've proven that we prefer him with Mary Jane rather than without, which is true. We don't actually need 1,000 different spider people, and we sure don't need everybody named Mama. It's a symbiote world. So no one understands why they are determined to give us fans everything except what we want. This has been the current kind of, this is part of the zeitgeist now. This has been part of the energy for the last 10 years to spike the fans. But we keep proving, especially with Peter Parker in particular, say that 3 times fast, that, we don't have a problem with him at any age. At any age, there's no age we have a problem with Peter with. So, and I also wanted to offer some solutions, because I normally don't come with just, even though I'm often accused of it, I don't come with criticisms. I come also with solutions. Okay. So, part of the kick of Spider-Man, which I think is what they were trying to recapture with Miles Morales, part of the kick of Spider-Man is being a sophomore in high school and then getting these superpowers. Okay. How would that change your life? How would that change your mentality? And we know from Peter learning the hard way that he was responsible. The great tagline, with great responsibility with great power must also come great responsibility. And Peter learned that the hard way, because he didn't interfere when a thief was running past him, and that thief subsequently killed his Uncle Ben. That's the story of Spider-Man. We know it and we love it. So here's a solution for all those who seem to have a problem, and it's not fans. They actually have a title where Peter and Mary Jane are married and they have children. It's their best-selling Spider-Man title. That don't tell them nothing. But anyway, for all of those who, I guess, more the creators than us fans, if you want to tell stories about Peter when he was young, all you have to do is create a Tales of Spider-Man title. The same way they created Superboy, because Superboy is a retcon. So originally, Superman just became Superman after Clark grew up here on Earth. But eventually, they said, no, we want to have some adventures of him as a teen. So they retconned and created Superboy and said, these are the adventures of Superman when he was a teen. That's where Lana Lang comes from. That's where Pete Ross comes from. That's where the rivalry between Clark and Lex started, when Superboy was blowing out a fire in his lab, but it took out Lex's hair. All that stuff is a retcon, so they could tell stories about Superman at that age. All you need is a title, Tales of Spider-Man, Tales of Peter Parker, and tell stories that happen in between the original issues of the Stan Lee, Steve Ditko run all the way back in the day. Tell stories that happen when Peter first got his powers. Tell stories of what that was like, since that's the age so many of the people in charge think Spider-Man needs to be popular. Create a title. Go back in time like they did for Superboy and tell stories of, I know they did that with the Ultimate Universe. You can do it again. Why? Why couldn't you? Why not? Go back to when Peter was a sophomore in high school. He gets a spider bite, and then do a 12-issue series every year of a month in his life that year in school. So do sophomore year, then junior year, then senior year. That would be cool. What's wrong with that? When he gets out, he's 18, still plenty of time for teenage adventures. What's wrong with that? See, so this is an easy fix. And his main titles, you can let Peter, and see the solution there is the same one they use for Batman. And that is, you're just going to have to freeze him in his 30s. Because Batman's aging don't make no sense. It's comic book aging, because how Batman going to have Grayson and Jason Todd back from the dead, and Tim Drake and Stephanie Brown and his own son Damian, and Bruce still what, 38? So, we have to, those are what we call conceits of the mythos. And that's stuff that we just have to accept to make the comic book work. I don't know at what point that started making people angry because it's a comic book. As much as I love comic books and as long as I've been reading comic books and as much as I know about comic books, it's a comic book. So there are some things we have to concede to in the story to make the story work. Like Superman hiding in plain sight behind a pair of glasses, a nasally voice, and a hunched over posture. Christopher Reeve made that work. He not only made us believe that a man could fly, but he made us believe that somebody could pull off convincing you that Clark and Superman were two different people. So he did that better than anybody, which is why he's still the gold standard. But that's a conceit of the Superman mythos that literally a building full of reporters wouldn't be able to figure out that every time Superman's around, Clark is gone and vice versa. So, I mean, it's a comic book, good Lord. And so, Batman got a freeze frame in his late 30s. Okay. He got umpteen of Google Robins, but okay. So Peter can max out in his age around 35, 38, have little Mayday, and she can be just like a Robin. Peter can stay that age. Mayday can grow up, become Spider Girl, or whatever. It's a comic book. Make tales of Peter Parker, make tales of Spider-Man. Tell them young stories you're dying to tell because you think that's the best version of the character. And boom, we could have the best of all possible worlds. Do you see how easy it is to come up with solutions? That's why I keep trying to make people understand. It's not hard. It don't have to be hard. But people being pig-headed and stubborn and spiteful for no reason, just to anger the fans, just to make people mad. Why? Why? Just to own the chuds? Why? That doesn't make any sense. Okay. That does not make any sense. So there's that one. So let's move on to the next one. Next one, I said this right here. I said, out of all the Marvel teams, they have the clearest and oldest blueprint from the comics. And out of all the Marvel teams, said blueprint has been the most consistently ignored in live action. I stand by that 100%. I'm talking about the Fantastic Four. I have to get to the point where I have to stop thinking about it because it makes me so angry because it's just so stupid. The Fantastic Four, the first 100 issues by Lee and Kirby are classic, all-time classic, set the tone. I mean, just so many different wonderful things happen. Their rogues gallery is unparalleled. All the people that we meet, from the Red Ghost to Mole Man to the Puppet Master to Annihilus, I mean Galactus, it's all right there. You literally don't have to add anything to the Fantastic Four to make them interesting. All you have to do is use the pattern, the precedent already established in the original Lee and Kirby run. How could you possibly go wrong? How? How? How could you go wrong? You can't. But they keep throwing out the precedent that's already been established in the comics and just coming up with some stuff that makes them even worse in live action. Like not getting Dr. Doom right at all when his origin is inextricably tied into Reed Richards. Like thinking that somehow you can't find a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white woman to play Sue, so you have to cast another ethnicity, race swapping Johnny Storm, and then making Reed inept and incompetent and apologetic when that is the opposite of his character. Reed Richards has drive and ambition to the point where he's one of those geniuses that's always spending most of his time in his head, and so he doesn't have a lot of social skill. He ends up ignoring his wife and his family. He's the one that put him in danger to get on that rocket ship. He's not Pedro Pascal in any way, means, shape, or form. They keep throwing out the blueprint that's already been established by the comics and come up with these twists, I guess, that they think is better, but they're not better. You already got the pattern right there in the comics. You already got the Rose Gallery. It's just right there. It's just so frustrating. So that's why sometimes I just have to emotionally disconnect, because I'm like, this is not hard. And the answers are right there. They just, for whatever reason, choose to ignore them. And I'm like, okay, I guess y'all don't want to win. That's another thing I've had to accept. I've had to accept that many times people do things because they don't want to win. They don't actually want to succeed. They want to destroy. They want to bring people down. They want to be negative. And I don't have time for all that, because I want to win. Okay. And I am a winner. A winner. All I do is win, 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 no matter what. Okay. So leave me some comments. I don't see any comments yet. You guys give me some comments, because I'll pull them up at the end, because I want to talk about it. I want to hear what you have to say. Here's my next unpopular opinion on the X-Men. This is another one I stand by 100%. It's always been a mistake to start the live action X-Men without starting with the original 5. I don't see how that is arguable. So I heard some people say this week that, the X-Men didn't blow up until Claremont and Byrne for a reason, and blah, 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 blah. And I do agree that those are classic X-Men years. There's never been anything like that before or since. I agree. But with today's technology and today's writing and today's capabilities, there is no way you couldn't make a good movie about Scott, Jean, Warren, Hank, and Bobby to establish them. And you can even have it turn into establishing the all-new X-Men by them getting lost in Krakoa, and Xavier having to form a new team to go get the original team, just like in the comics. How hard would that be? How hard would that be to do one movie with the original 5, and we get to know them? This is also necessary for Dark Phoenix to have any impact. For Dark Phoenix to have any meaning, you must fall in love with Jean Grey. And to fall in love with Jean Grey, you have to spend time with her. I don't even know why I have to explain that. We didn't spend enough time with Famke Janssen as G. Am I saying her name right? I don't know if I've ever seen it right. And then Sophie Turner, we didn't spend enough time with her. You have to fall in love with Jean. You have to see that Jean is the most unself-aware telepath of all time, because all the men around her were in love with her and she didn't see it. How could you be a telepath and you can't tell that all the males in your life love you? Jean originally was that unassuming. She was that underconfident. She was that just kind of unaware. So you have to understand that innocent young woman, for her to grow into what Mastermind did to her, to take her all the way through her turn and Black Queen and, Dark Phoenix, and when she first became Phoenix and all that, that doesn't have any meaning if you don't understand who Jean was in the first place. That's why we need an original 5 movie to establish everything I just said. It would take but one movie. And you can't tell me it wouldn't do well. Yes, it would, because it's X-Men. People are hungry for more X-Men all the time. All the time, all the time, all the time. People are hungry for X-Men all the time. So you can't tell me that wouldn't do well. Because yes, it would. Very much so. All right. Next one up. This is another one that I don't think is arguable. Thor should have never been made a joke in the MCU. He always holds back his true power, which is true. Have you ever seen some real comics where Thor really cuts loose like he can? He's awesome and very, very scary. Now, the reason that's so important to me, the reason that has such impact, is because normies don't read comics, not like we do. And normies don't know comics history, not like we do, but normies know movies, and normies know the TV shows and what has been the image of Thor in the movies. Besides the first one was good. After that, we got on this comedic turn, and it took the whole wrong turn in Ragnarok. I know a lot of people love Ragnarok. I didn't. And then when we get to Love and Thunder, it's just embarrassingly bad. And then when we get to Infinity War and Endgame, and we got Fat Thor, he's out of shape, he's depressed, he's drinking himself into a stupor every day, really. That whole direction was wrong. That's not who Thor is. And he never should have become the butt of the joke. He never should have become that side of himself, or, Thor Lebowski or Thor Bowski. He never should have become that. He didn't get his propers. He didn't get his due in the MCU. And all of us that have loved Thor for a very long time can't stand that. Okay? All right, let me move on to the next one. Oh, Lord. Okay, here's another one that's always full of controversy for whatever reason. I don't know why it's full of controversy, but it is. Okay, so I said when it comes to Captain America, Chris Evans has reached Chris Reeve levels of portrayal of this character, and he has. Chris Evans has so defined Captain America for us. Now, MCU Captain America is different from comic book Captain America. But in many, many, many ways, MCU Captain America elevated original Captain America. For example, he's stronger. Comic book Cap was originally a peak human. So think like Olympic level athletes. MCU Cap actually has super strength, super speed, a healing factor, so many different things. So he elevated that super soldier formula to actually give him a level of superpowers, which I think works better for the character, to be honest. Because the original idea of a super soldier was just supposed to be so they can make more super soldiers, more, humans at their peak. But MCU Captain America is actually a superhero. He's a metahuman. He's an enhanced individual, which I think is much better. And Chris Evans just blew this role out of the park to the point where he's at Chris Reeve levels. I know they have to recast Captain America eventually, but no one's going to touch Chris Evans, just like no one can touch Chris Reeve when it comes to Superman. No one's going to be able to touch Chris Evans when it comes to Cap. And this is also controversial, Sam Wilson will never be this man. You're never going to make Sam Wilson have the same impact. You're never going to make Sam Wilson have the same popularity. You're never going to make Sam Wilson substitute for Steve Rogers, because nobody can. Sam can't do it. Bucky can't do it. Peggy can't do it. John Walker can't do it. Can't be done. Okay? When they picked Steve Rogers, they picked a one of a kind. And he wasn't picked for any other reason than his heart. And those other characters don't have the heart that Steve does. Steve was a hero with or without the super soldier formula. And so this is not going to be duplicated. I'm sorry. So trying to be progressive and move on and Marvel now, and we got to get rid of all the old white men or whatever, you're not going to replace Cap. Bucky's whole arc in Thunderbolt should have been, well, first of all, Captain America Brave New World should have been about Bucky and not Sam. That movie should have been about Bucky taking up the shield, which is what we thought everything was being set up for. And then I see Air Rock in the comics. I'm going to pull that up. In the comments, I'm going to pull that up. Thank you. It should have been about Bucky taking over the shield, Bucky trying to live up to Steve's legend and realizing that he couldn't. So then Bucky retires the shield from himself, forms the Thunderbolts, and then tries to right wrongs as a Winter Soldier by going back to places that only the Winter Soldier would know about. That's what Brave New World and Thunderbolts should have been. Them two would have been hits if they had done that. Because you are not going to replace Steve Rogers, and you're not going to replace Chris Evans as Steve Rogers. He'll be succeeded, but you know, he won't be replaced. It's not going to happen. Okay. So, uh, Sam Wilson, Captain America, is another Kamala Khan type of thing where, as opposed to someone like She Hulk, She Hulk was popular in the comics. Yes, she's a spinoff of Bruce Banner. Yes, that's her cousin. Yes, she got her powers from him. But she developed kind of her own thing, and people loved her for that in the comics. So my point is, she never had to be forced on us. We always liked She-Hulk for who she was. Sam Wilson, Kamala Khan, all these characters they try to force feed them on people. They try to make them popular. Carol Danvers as Captain Marvel. They try to make her happen, and so it's never going to happen. So you can use the super soldier formula to say the Cap doesn't age. You can do whatever kind of comic booky tricks you need to do, but you're not going to replace Steve Rogers ever. And whenever you recast Captain America, still not going to be as good as Chris Evans. How many different Superman have we had since the late 70s? And Chris Reeve is still the gold standard to this day. To this day. Okay? All right. Let me move on to my next one. Now, I made another tweet about this one as well today, but let me put this on the screen. Here I said, they centered absolutely everything in the MCU around Tony Stark. Now they're stuck with that. That's true. I always thought that was a mistake. I enjoyed the first Iron Man movie, don't get me wrong. But when I saw that they cut out Hank Pym, and Hank Pym wasn't even going to be a part of the original Avengers and Janet Van Dyne, and he wasn't going to invent Ultron, and everything now centers around Tony Stark. His weapons are what made Pietro and Wanda hate him, and him and Bruce Banner created Ultron, and everything's always about Tony Stark. They're stuck with that now. That's why they think bringing Robert Downey Jr. back as a variant version of Doctor Doom is going to make a difference. It's not going to make the difference they think it will, because they put all their eggs in one basket, which was a mistake. In the comics, Tony Stark is not the center of everything that happened in the Marvel Universe, not by a long shot. Okay? But it was a mistake to do that in the MCU. And so earlier today, I made a tweet about how I was looking at a cartoon and I realized how much I miss pre-MCU Iron Man, because he was a completely different character. Robert Downey Jr., and I'm not saying it's bad. I love him. I love the movie. I love him as a character. But Robert Downey Jr. and Joss Whedon infused Tony Stark with a lot of snark. Tony Stark, before the MCU, was not overly snarky. Not overly. And now that's become the tenor and the tone of everything in the MCU. And so Iron Man, Tony Stark, before the MCU, was a lot more stoic. I know that's hard to believe. Yes, he was still reckless. Yes, he was still a womanizer, a ladies' man. Yes, he still struggled with alcohol. All that was still true. But he himself was a little bit more stoic and a little bit more grounded. But now, the version of him that's in the MCU just has dominated everything. So they're kind of stuck with that now. So, if that's the way you build your universe, that's where you build your universe. Okay. I see your comments. I'm going to get to them. Keep them coming. I love them. And I'm going to get to them in a minute when I finish my quasi rants. Okay. Now, this next one, y'all already know where I'm coming from with this one. So if you follow me for any period of time, you know how I feel about Batman. Batman is my favorite character, tied with Captain Marvel or Shazam. So I said, I don't care how much of a Mary Sue people think he is, because a lot of people hate what Grant Morrison did to Batman because they kind of put him at Bat God level. And a lot of people hate that Batman has squared off against Darkseid and beat him. And recently in a comic book, Batman survived a fall from the moon. Now that's pushing just a little too far. I'll give you that one. Batman survived a fall from the moon and got up. That's a little too far, but be that as it may. Okay, I still don't care how much of a Mary Sue people think he is. Batman consistently sells whatever media he's in. If you look up the best-selling titles every month, then 3 or 4 of them are always Batman. That don't tell you nothing. So I don't care what people have to say. He's a beloved character. He's commercially successful repeatedly. So somebody must like him. It's not just us comic fans. Normies love him too. And Kevin Conroy's voice will not forever be his in my head. Now, Kevin Conroy is the Chris Reeve of Batman voice actors. Kevin Conroy's voice, man, that is Batman now. I'm sorry, you're not gonna. We've heard other actors voice Batman. It's never the same. Doesn't have the same menace, doesn't have the same edge, doesn't have the same grit, doesn't have the same tone. Yeah, I'm sorry. Not that they've done a poor job, don't misunderstand me, but I'm saying it's not Conroy. So as far as I'm concerned, Batman sounds like Conroy in my head. Whenever I'm reading something and I read Batman's lines, it's Conroy talking, as far as I'm concerned. So you can argue with how you feel about the character. You can argue with me or other people like that because opinions are subjective and everybody has their own. Nothing wrong with that. You can't argue with sales numbers. Those are not subjective. Batman consistently sells his books almost more than any other character. Batman consistently improves almost every media presentation that he's in. There's some movies that aren't good, like I haven't watched this Batman Aztec thing. I haven't watched that yet. But, there's a few misfires, but you can't argue with consistent, repeated commercial success. So it doesn't matter whether you like him or not. He's powerful. He's fundamental. He's best-selling. Hasn't been out of print since 1939. So I don't care how much of a Mary Sue people think he is. I love him. Okay. Now, we're going to take what I just said and we're going to take that to the next level with Superman. Okay? Because here's what I had to say about Superman. He hasn't been out of print since 1938. He's been translated into every artistic medium that there is. There's no form of media that we have that hasn't had Superman content. From the earliest animation to comic books to novels to TV shows to radio shows to movie serials to movies to anime, you name it. There is no media, presentation, technology, or platform that exists in the world that hasn't had Superman on it. Okay? He hasn't been out of print since 1938. He's been translated into every artistic medium that there is. So those that call him old-fashioned and boring and out of touch don't know what the heck they're talking about. He's not old-fashioned, he's not boring, and he's not out of touch. What he is like Captain America, he represents ideals. He represents, like, I finally found out who made that tweet. I saved it somewhere in my bookmarks. But he said that Superman is not a power fantasy. Superman is a fantasy about what if someone with power was good. Perfect. That's perfectly stated. I can't say it any better than that because that's right. Superman is about having this demigod-like power, but choosing to be a servant instead of a tyrant. Do you see what I mean? And it's about the goodness in his heart and him being grateful that he was adopted by the Kents and not turned into a lab experiment, not cloned and turned into a super soldier, which is what the government wants to do, which is what Lex Luthor is always trying to do. But they raised him and they gave him a human heritage, a human background. They taught the Man of Steel how to walk with his feet on the ground. And Superman is forever grateful to his adoptive parents for that. That's who he is. He's not boring, he's not old-fashioned, and he's not out of touch. He just has a set of values that aren't in fashion today. That's not old-fashioned in the sense of irrelevant. See, old-fashioned to me is technology that no longer has any purpose. That's old-fashioned. We don't have to do it that way because we got better tech. But values never go out of style. What's wrong with truth, justice, and the American way? What's wrong with fighting for those that can't fight for themselves? What's wrong with that? See, that's timeless. And that's what Superman represents at his best. So he and Batman are the most recognized superhero icons in the world, along with Spider-Man. Superman, Batman, Spider-Man are the most recognized. There's no country on this planet you could go to where the people would not recognize their emblems. Okay, and I'll be glad when the current cancer gets their hands off of him. You know who I'm talking about when I say that. Because he's just a cancer. So I'll be glad when he gets done with the son of Jor-El, because he hasn't done anything but create mess that I can't stand. And I'm not the only one. But there's nothing wrong with Superman being exactly who he is. Okay? He doesn't need to evolve for the modern audience. As a matter of fact, that's actually the reason why he needs to stay like he is, to serve as an anchor, a reminder of times when helping your fellow man was the norm, was the expectation. So I've seen a bunch of tweets about people laughing at the idea of people that were children last century running around outside, playing by ourselves, riding bikes, and only to be told we had to be home before the streetlights were on and we didn't have any cell phones. That absolutely happened because people weren't so crazy back then. In the African American community, if another adult saw you behaving inappropriately, they would chastise you, and then they would tell your parents, and then you get another whipping for embarrassing your parents. I know it's hard to believe in today's times, but people looked out for each other in a way that they don't now. People weren't shooting up schools and whatnot when I was a kid. That wasn't even a thought. So I'm saying, yes, we very much played outside. Yes, we very much just had to be in before the streetlights came on. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew everybody else's families, and it wasn't that big of a deal. So yes, you need a character that's a reminder of the fact that that used to be the norm, and it was wrong for that to go out of style. Because people are saying stuff now like they wish the asteroid would hurry up and come and end the world. I wonder why they're saying that. Okay, next one up, and I'm almost done. Then I'm going to read your comments. Keep them coming, guys, in the comments, because I'm loving them, as always. About Wonder Woman, I said, sure, it would be nice if we had some creative team that honored every aspect of who Diana is. I can't stress this enough. Normally, when people are writing stories about Wonder Woman, they pick one aspect of her character. And lately, since the New 52, it's just been her being a warrior. No, Diana is a clay statue brought to life by the love and prayers of her mother. Diana has weaknesses. A lot of people just don't know how to write them. one of the weaknesses Diana has is always trying to please her mother and being devastated when her mother is not happy with her. So if you read the earliest Wonder Woman stories, you can see that her weakness was being bound by a man. If Diana got tied up by a man, she lost all of her extra powers that were granted to her by the gods. She's not just a warrior, she is a warrior. And by the way, Themyscira is not a backwards nation because they had guns. If you just read the earliest Wonder Woman appearances, they played bullets and bracelets. And that was the thing that helped Diana win the contest because she was the best at deflecting the bullets. How did they get bullets if they so backwards? So the Amazons are not backwards. But she is a warrior. She's also the whole entire purpose of the Wonder Woman is to be an ambassador to man's world. I know a lot of people don't know that about Diana. The whole point, that's why her costume is modeled after the American flag. It's right there in her first appearance. Hippolyta knew that if man's world was going to begin to encroach on them, they needed to build a bridge so there wouldn't be a war. So she selected someone to go to man's world as an ambassador for Themyscira to represent the Amazonian culture to build bridges. That contest was held for the strongest Amazon. Diana had wore a disguise so her mother would know it was her, which is laughable, but whatever. She won, and that's why Diana became the Wonder Woman. So she's a child of love. She's a child of magic. She's an ambassador. She's a warrior. She's the only thing she's insecure about is whether or not she can live up to her mother's expectations. She's definitely a fish out of water, though. I'll give her that. And when she gets tied up by a man, she loses all of her enhancements. So most people don't know what I just said about Wonder Woman, unless you are a comics aficionado from way back. Most people don't know what I said because we've never seen a full realization of Diana, and we should, because she's a great character. Okay, trying to see how many more I have here, because I have quite a few. Let me just run through them because I want to get to your comments. Okay. So I won't spend as much time on these next ones. Okay, here I said proof before Flashpoint that all heroes don't have to be motivated by tragedy. Some are motivated by a desire to do right and help people. Talking about the Flash. The Flashes are always smiling. Have you ever noticed that? Jay, Barry, Wally, and Bart, they're always smiling because they use their speed to help people and they enjoy doing so. They all have stable marriages. I mean, Jay, Barry, and Wally do. So they tried to retcon Flash at Flashpoint and give him a tragic backstory where Thawne killed his mom to make him be more like Batman. Not necessary. Okay? Because the Flashes, all of them, from the Golden Age Flash all the way up to today, have always used their speed to help others with a smile. That is the Flash family. Okay? Oh, Lord, here's a big one. They just don't understand Hal Jordan or the Green Lantern Corps. Tom Cruise is Hal Jordan, Maverick is Hal. Now, I'll stand by that. I don't care what people say. I know a lot of people don't like Tom Cruise in that role, don't care. That is Hal Jordan. They don't understand Hal Jordan. They don't understand someone who has the ability to overcome great fear, which is just Cruise incarnate. All the stunts that he's done, Mission Impossible 2, he's hanging off that cliff for real, running down the Burj Khalifa. The Burj Khalifa, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? So you can't tell me that Cruise hasn't overcome great fear in his life. He's not afraid of much. That is Hal. Top Gun Maverick is Hal. That's Hal Jordan. They just don't get him. They just don't get him. They just don't get him. What you say? He's not Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds is Deadpool. That's the right role for him. Okay? Tom Cruise is Jordan for real. Maverick, a fictional character, is Hal Jordan. They just don't understand who Hal Jordan is. Okay? These are unpopular opinions. These are my opinion. I've been wanting to say this for a long time. Aquaman is not Jason Momoa. I don't care what anybody says. I know the women like him and everything, and I know his movie did $1 billion. That's all good. Arthur Curry is not Jason Momoa. Jason Momoa is Lobo, which is who he's finally going to play in Supergirl movie. He's not Aquaman. He ain't never been Aquaman. I don't know how somebody looked at him and decided that Momoa was Arthur Curry, because he's not. Never has been, and I don't see Aquaman when I look at him. I see Jason Momoa dressed up like Aquaman. Just my opinion. Martian Manhunter has been done wrong more than any OG Justice League or comic book history. I don't understand how that's arguable. Getting rid of him or replacing him with Cyborg, when Cyborg's a Titan, people still don't know that he's more powerful than Superman. People still don't seem to understand that John has more powers than Kal-El. He's got all the powers of the Kryptonians, plus telepathy, plus intangibility, plus shape-shifting. Okay? And he's just as strong as Superman. They dumb this character down to make Superman shine when they shouldn't. Superman himself has said in the comics that out of all the people he would want to fight, he wouldn't want to fight Martian Manhunter. That don't tell you nothing. Okay, I'm going to keep it moving. Now, I said about Hawkgirl, no way Kendra will ever be as popular as Shayera. Kendra is the Miles Morales of Hawkgirls. Now, I had to make a subsequent tweet because someone told me people don't know the backstory about the Hawks. It's very, very convoluted. They ended up retconning it with a reincarnation storyline, which just made it worse. Let me find the tweet that I made, because I just made it today. Here it is. And I said, on the matter of Hawk Girls, and then I went into the different ones. So we've had Shira Hall, is the original Hawk Girl from the Golden Age. Then we have Shayera Hall, which is the one that was on Justice League Animated. That's the one that I thought most people knew. For the same reason they know Jon Stewart. The third Hawk Girl, the one I was talking about, is Kendra Saunders, who was originally from Earth 2. She's a retcon, but she's normally the current one, and that's the one that was in the Superman movie. She's never going to be as popular as Shayera Hall to me, but maybe that's because I know who they are. So that's why I put that tweet out there. So those are my unpopular opinions that I shared this week. Now let me get to your comments, because I'm loving these comments. Eric says, First Avenger got it right when it comes to the formula. Good becomes great, bad becomes worse. That's awesome. The weakness of First Avenger was that Cap and Red Skull weren't connected enough. You have to keep the protagonist and the antagonist either in the same space, or you have to keep them connected. Best example of that is Vader and Luke in Empire Strikes Back. In the beginning of Empire Strikes Back, Vader is hunting for Luke, and they find him on Hoth, and Vader is in the underground caverns. The Millennium Falcon takes off, but Luke is actually right above him in the snow. So he got close. And then they don't get back together in the same physical space until Luke comes to them on Cloud City. But they're connected all throughout the movie. Another good example is the second Terminator, because you feel the T-1000 even when he's not on the screen. You feel him. See, so you have to keep them connected. So the weakness of First Avenger is that Cap and Red Skull were not connected enough. Okay, they just kind of meet at the end and have like a 3-minute fight. Okay. Leave Sam as the Falcon, great character. That's right. Everybody loved Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson, and everybody loved Sam Wilson as Falcon. Should have kept it there. Should have kept it there. What did you have to lose? What did you gain by trying to force Sam Wilson as Captain America? Zero. Okay. Cajun says, from my understanding, Iron Man wasn't that popular before the MCU. That's right, he wasn't. He was definitely considered a C-list character. So the MCU elevated him and Cap and Thor to a certain extent as well. The most popular character out of the original Avengers in the first movie was Hulk, primarily because of the Bill Bixby, Lou Ferrigno TV show. People knew who Hulk was. But yes, the MCU raised the profiles, and the reason they used those characters is because they had auctioned off the rights to Fantastic Four and X-Men. That's why they started with Avengers and Spider-Man. He went to Sony. Sony ain't never given Spider-Man up, so don't even think about it. So no, he wasn't that popular. So yes, it elevated him. But I'm saying in that elevation, it solidified that particular take on him. And I still like who Iron Man was before the MCU. He's a different character than Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark. Okay? And I'm not saying it's bad. I loved it. I'm saying it's a different character. I liked who he was before. But we can't argue about how it was the MCU that elevated him. That is inarguable. So, yeah, you're right about that. Tony Stark in the MCU is basically a lot of Hawkeye in the comics. Stark in comics is a combo of Bond, Musk, and Steve Jobs. The relationship that Cap and Iron Man have in the movies is what Cap and Hawkeye have in the comics. They took Hawkeye's personality and gave it to Tony. So all the wisecracking, all the banter, all the calling Captain America old, Hawkeye called him Methuselah and all different kind of stuff. Hawkeye did that in the comics, not Tony. That's unique to the movies. That's what I'm saying. I missed that version because they changed Hawkeye's whole personality and basically stripped him of one. Who is Hawkeye in the MCU movies? Who is Renner's Hawkeye? Who is he? See, he came out of a carnival. He's snarky, wisecracking. He's a bunch of things in the comics, and they took all that away and made him much more bland. From what I understand, Gunn is building toward the Superman everyone's familiar with in the DCU, supposedly. I don't care. I could not possibly care about what Shimon is doing with Superman. I can't wait for him to be gone off of heading Superman-based projects. I can't wait for Shimon's stench to be off of DC. He ain't gonna never be Superman. Every scene of Superman getting beat up, getting punked, falling out of the sky, screaming in sunlight, Supergirl cursing him out. No. I know a lot of people love that movie. You can have it. You are never going to get me to have any confidence in Shimon and Superman. That is over. Just for the record. Captain Marvel is not big with superpowers. This is absolutely correct. Talking about who they call Shazam now. Shazam is not his name. Shazam is a wizard name. But Captain Marvel is not big with superpowers. Captain Marvel is not Billy's mind in an adult body. Captain Marvel is Billy as an adult. So Billy, in his normal form, is 12. When he says Shazam and turns into Captain Marvel, he's 30 years old. And his body is charged with the powers of those 6 historical figures that gave him the power. And he's Billy as an adult. He has the same heart, but he does not have a 12-year-old's mind. Okay, so that's another one to where ever since I saw that Shazam cover New 52, I was like, nope, they ruined him. Okay. Yeah, I don't know where they were going with Aquaman. I don't know either, because that's not Aquaman. That's not him. Just isn't. And there's nothing you could do to make me see Aquaman when I see him. Just like you can't make me see Flash when I look at Ezra Miller. I see Ezra Miller in a Flash costume. That ain't Flash. What do they have against a blonde-haired Barry Allen? Can somebody tell me that? Because we ain't never had one in live action. Is Martian Manhunter hard to write because he's too powerful? No. You just have to know what you're doing. So everybody knows about John's weakness to fire, but everybody doesn't seem to understand the life of a telepathic race without other telepaths around you is lonely and isolating. So John has loneliness as a weakness because he longs to hear the voices in his head and he doesn't hear them anymore because his race is gone. John also knows that there are two other aliens, at least on the Justice League, Superman, Hawkman. They look like white guys from Earth. John knows that he doesn't in his natural form. So John knows that people will always be afraid of him and people will never accept him for who he is. He has that as well. John also lost his family on Mars. So he's got the tragedy of losing his wife and children. He's got the rivalry with the white Martians because they've always hated each other. It was like that was their civil war. He's got the loneliness of being one of the last of his race. He's got the weakness to fire. And he's got the painful truth that humans will never accept him for who he really is. So no, he is not hard to write because he's too powerful. You just have to know what you're doing. Because there's plenty of stories that can come out of that, his weaknesses. What are John's desires? His desires are to fit in, to belong to somebody, but he knows he has to shapeshift to do that. Okay, that has to weigh on him. Also, what if you do like Superman? Because Superman's a great fight. So when he's fighting somebody in his weight class, like Darkseid or Mongul, John can have those kind of fights too, where he goes toe to toe with a foe that can hold their own with him. So no, John is not too hard to write. As far as I'm concerned, like I said, you just have to know what you're doing. And you have to create characters that know how to counter his powers, because people keep forgetting. People talk about Superman's vulnerability to magic, but they also forget that Superman is also vulnerable to psychic attacks. His brain does not have any extra protection. Superman's mind can be taken over. It has been by Starro, by Zatanna, by Brainiac. So it would be interesting to see John go up against another telepath to see who could hold their own. So yeah, no, you can write tons of stories for Martian Manhunter. You just have to know what you're doing. Okay. All right, y'all, that's it for me today. Thought I'd talk about my unpopular opinions. Thank you so much for those of you that watch me live. Thank you so much for those of you that left comments. If you're watching this on replay, leave me some comments below because I'd love to hear from you. I will be back next week, same time, for my next weekly installment of Weekly Comics Chat, where I talk about what caught my attention in comic book fandom for the week. All right? See y'all later. Everybody have a good day. DD2 Comics Chat out.